Hey everybody, welcome to my studio. This channel is all about tips and tools and tutorials for growing in watercolor. In this video, I'm going to paint one of my favorite subjects, the human face. I'm going to show you step by step how I painted this portrait of a young man. If you feel intimidated by the idea of painting a portrait, then go get your brushes and your paint and just paint along with me on this one. It's a fun challenge. Let's get started. I'm in the middle of a 30-day challenge where I am attempting to paint in watercolor a portrait every day, trying to do it in about 30 to 40 minutes. And this is the reference image that I'll be using today. You can see it here on the screen. And I got this image off of Unsplash.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. The colors I'll be using are shown here. I'll be using Naples yellow and Pyro red for skin tones, maybe a little bit of raw sienna mixed in there. I'll be using some cobalt blue and some maybe neutral tint for that sweater. And I'll be using burnt umber for the hair. And I think some lavender mixed in a few places, a sweater and some shadow areas. And that should do it. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to mix up some nice puddle of this Naples yellow. Naples yellow is definitely a convenience color, but when it comes to doing Caucasian skin tone, it is really handy because it just really does a great job. Mix it a little bit of red to get a little more pink. This is Pyro red, and you can go all the way from a pinky tone like you see here over to a real nice yellowish color. I might have actually a little bit of yellow. I didn't mention that. I might put in a little of that. But I'm going to start real light here and start on the face. And again, we always start in watercolor with the lightest colors. The only thing I'm going to do right now is avoid the whites, the areas I want to keep white, which would be here in his eyes. In the whites of his eyes, I need to not paint around that. Paint in that area. Bridge of his nose is pretty white, so I'm going to leave that there. Oh, I went a little too much there. I can lift it up. But areas like his beard, mustache, I can just paint right through that because they're going to be darker eventually, so I don't need to try and like paint around those areas. Even the lips, it doesn't matter. I can just paint right over that. And again, mustache. The only places I need to avoid are the real whites that I want to retain. So that bridge of the nose, down the ridge of the nose, except for there in the middle maybe. This is quite a bit darker on this side of the face. It'll be all in shadow, so definitely can go through that. Again, the only thing I'm doing is avoiding the whites of his eyes. It's a little less pronounced in the right eye because it's in shadow. There's a bit of highlight there on the left side of his forehead, so I'll kind of keep that white as well. And again, that ear back there is in shadow. And I'm just going to go right down. And it gets a little bit more red in his neck here. And I'll just come right down into here. Again, this is the first wash. I'm trying to keep a bead going here so I don't get back runs. But I also will be glazing over some of these areas a little later. Okay. Got to watch my paint consistency and the wetness of the paper, make sure I don't get back runs, but I think I can come in here at this point and drop in some darker tones on this side. Again, as long as I use a pretty thick consistency of paint and not as much water, I'm kind of squeezing out the water on the brush and just getting quite a bit of paint there. I can do this without getting blooms. It's always the challenge. Oh, down here along alongside this side of the face. Okay. I'm just going to keep going. This again is first wash. I don't need to worry too much about shadows and dark areas yet, so let's just not worry about that. Let's come in and take some of my burnt umber, and I'm looking at the hair and I'm thinking, well, there's some pretty light areas in that hair. So I'm just going to come in and this is obviously, the hair is much darker than this overall, but I want to put in a light base so that later when I come back over with the darker burnt umber, this light will kind of shine through, almost like the highlights in his hair, right? That'll work. And again, I'm just kind of messing around here. Again, I'm got most of the water off my brush now, and I'm kind of just painting back into some of these areas, dropping in the burnt umber, almost solid pigment paint without a lot of water on the brush, which will give me, again, keep me from getting back runs. Just kind of putting some of the texture of the hair in while I can, while it's real soft and wet. And understanding the consistency of your paint and the wetness of your paper and how they will interact with each other is oh so important in learning how to paint in watercolor, probably one of the most important things. And it's pretty dark along the bottom here and on this edge just a little bit. But these soft edges that you can achieve too when you drop paint into a wet area are beautiful as well, and you want to take advantage of that while this first wash is wet. Okay, I'm going to leave that like that for now. And I'm going to go into the sweater area now. And what I thought of doing is, if I squint and look at that, there's bits of blue in that, kind of like in the light fleck areas of the sweater that I see. And so I'm just going to, again, for my lightest wash on the sweater, even though the sweater looks much more gray, whatever, I'm gonna first put down this really light wash of cobalt here, very light. You've heard the consistency of the paint here described as tea, meaning like if a really weak tea mixture where it's very little color in the water and mostly just water. That's what I'm using here. Okay, so a tea consistency of paint. And okay, and then again, since I've done that, I've got most of the water out of my brush, get a little thicker consistency here now, I could come back in and maybe, especially in these areas that are on the right side of the sweater where it's in the shade, or I should say the cast shadow of his face. It's really dark in there. It's really dark along in here. Yeah. Okay. And I think what I'm going to do now, because I bet some of these edges along here have probably gotten pretty dry. I'm going to come in with my very first kind of wash of the background. Partly because this right here, I want this edge with the shirt. Oops, there goes my phone, sorry. I want that to really blend, and since it was wet right now, it was easier to do. Also, his hair kind of just dissolves into the background along here. You really can't even see where his hair starts and stops. That's pretty much true all the way around here. So I don't have to be quite so careful about that. Of course, until you get down to this ear. And then that we don't want it to go into that ear so much because there's a really strong contrast there. Okay. But again, I'm just trying to cover all of the paper in this first wash. taking advantage of soft edges where I can get them, and covering the entire paper except for those real white highlights, which I think I did. Again, the white highlights from the forehead, left side of the nose, down in here. And these areas, even though they are covered with a bit of color, they're real light. And so that will, when I put a darker color next to this area in here, it will almost appear as white because it's so light. Okay. Oh, I wanted to drop. Yeah, I was thinking about this as I was doing it. I want to take my little bit of my, what's this called? Raw sienna. I don't know if it's too late now, but I wanted to drop it into that, where that button is, right there, because that button is in a sea of kind of blue. There's these brownish buttons. And I thought it would be nice to drop that paint in there again as this was wet so that it would bloom a little bit and blur. Because again, the areas where we want the sharpest edge is the focal point of the painting, which is the eyes, the facial features. So anywhere else in the painting, it's fine to get this kind of loose blending of colors. Okay, I think I'm going to let this dry now. Walk away for a good 20 minutes and let it dry until it's completely dry. One of the big mistakes I've made in the past is coming back too quickly to paint the second step. And when you do that, you end up having a really hard time glazing over and putting in your shadow areas and your other areas because it's just too wet. And so I want to wait till this is completely bone dry before I go on to the next step. All right, the paper is now completely dry. To test that, you can use the back of your hand, the back of your finger. And it's quite dry. It's not at all cool to the touch. And so I know I can come back in here now and start painting. I've mixed up, as you can see on the palette here, I've mixed up a couple puddles of, again, Naples yellow with some of my Pyrrole red. I even have some mixture with some raw sienna in it. These are all the colors of the face. And I want to start going darker now, so I need a little bit more, some paint that's a little thicker. It's not the tea consistency now. It's more, as they like to say, like coffee or getting into cream. And I'm just going to now start maybe in the upper left corner of the head here, of the face, and then start moving down in here. I'm just going to, again, I'm still looking at shapes as much as possible. Don't think eyebrow, forehead, just look at the area you're painting and try to decipher the shapes. I see some darkness along the head line there, the hairline, and then I see there, and I see the shadow comes that way a bit, and then to that eyebrow. Again, I'm going to go right through the eyebrow because it's going to be much darker later. Now, actually, as I get over here, I see we get into the shadow side, and it actually gets much more raw sienna-ish. And there's a bit of a shadow that comes that way, and then down in here. Of course, you don't really want to start working on both sides of the face at once because you've got a bead that might start drying there. You need to kind of attend to that. Okay, so I'm down in here through the beard again. I have my board at a slight angle, so it helps because the bead of water flows down the board and kind of creates a bead, and that keeps it from drying too quickly because where the bead is, the water's thicker and doesn't dry as quickly. Oh, so many things to think about in watercolor. It's unbelievable. I'm coming back and softening some of these edges too up in here. Where I put down some earlier, and I didn't want it to get too dry too quick. Darkening that. Coming in here, quite dark over this eye. Again, the only thing I'm doing is avoiding the whites of the eye, and it's much smaller in this area. The white of the eye is much, much less pronounced. And I almost think I might switch to a smaller brush here, but the goal is to use the biggest brush you can get away with, as they say. Because because small brushes, you tend to be finagle a little bit too much with the painting and get too busy. And if you work with a larger brush, you avoid that somewhat. Okay. I think I'm going to go half the lips here in this with this undercolor, and then come back later with the red, and all the way. Oh, where's the bottom of the nose? It's darker under there, quite a bit darker, and that's also mustache. I think I'll come in here with a little bit more of a synthetic, like stiffer brush, and just kind of come in and soften some of these areas. Got to do that carefully, not too much water on the brush. You want a nice collection of both hard edges in places and then going into soft edges, and so you have to kind of switch back and forth. And then I've got a little bit more red here, lips, particularly red there, but then it goes into almost more of a skin tone in the center of the lip. It's not real red. Again, this is a good example of where you need to paint shapes and not things. What do I mean by that? Well, we all know what a mouth looks like, at least we think we do. And if you just draw the outline of lips, they tend to look very silly because, again, we get this idea of what they should look like, and we kind of almost draw an outline, and it just is too much. And so the real area that pronouncement of the lips here is kind of in the center. There's a line that goes down the center, and that's way too much red. And right in here, right? And anyways, I'm going to come back and do the lips with a bit more detail in a bit. I haven't gotten to the real darks yet, so I don't want to get all caught up in that. But there's under the lips there, kind of a little darker area, so I'll use some of this, raw sienna along there. And again, these areas up in here are going to be even darker later, but I'm just trying to get this initial middle value in here. There's a bit of a light underneath that eye, but then right a little bit below that, again, we have like this shadow that really comes this way, really strong, and this way. Strongest area of shadow on the face. Well, and this ear over here is quite a bit darker too than the one on the other side. And there's a fair bit of red in there along the edge. And just kind of all over in there. Kind of staying with my warm red, my pyrrole red, as opposed to my cool red. Okay. And there's a bit of this kind of stuff going on over here too. Just going to put that in for now. Like I said earlier, it's quite a bit redder on the neck, so you can see it dried quite a bit lighter. I put that red down there earlier, and it really looked kind of dark at the time, but then we know that watercolor, especially the real thin washes that you initially put down, have a tendency to, they dry very much lighter than they appear when you first put them down. So you have to be bold in that first wash. And there's actually it's a bit along there, like that. But I don't want that strong of a line there, so I'm going to soften that. Okay. I want to squint a lot at your reference and kind of see where your dark areas are. And there's quite a bit darker in here, darker than what I have right now. So I'm coming back with a thicker bit of paint because that's wet there, and otherwise I'll get blooms if I don't have a thicker bit of paint. Okay. All right. Now, if you're despairing because it looks kind of maybe weird at this point or whatever, just remember your paintings always look a bit, I don't know, strange. It kind of is that ugly stage in the middle of a painting quite often. I'm doing a little neutral tint into this raw sienna. Just want to neutralize it a bit, and that's where neutral tint can really come in handy. And how it neutralizes that raw sienna. Kind of introduces almost a gray. And I think while I have it on there, I'm going to do the eyebrows here. Even though they're going to be quite a bit darker later, I just want to give an initial identifying those there. Trying to get that bit of a dark line in there. Not going too dark, but not, yeah, it's tricky. Okay, and I've kind of got this real dark area up. Shadows on a face can be tricky because, you know, we think shadows blue or gray, but if you put in too much blue or gray, often it looks really muddy on a face. So yeah, I didn't think that was a little too dark in there, so I'm kind of building up the tones too as we go. I'm going to come back to some of these areas, and I want to come in with the darks. So I'm just laying down some undertones here. All right, I'm just making my way around the painting. I'm going to come back into my sweater area. Cobalt blue, neutral tint, kind of a really nice gray. And see now, because I left these other grays and browns from before, they kind of show through, which looks nice. And I don't want to, not worried about a lot of detail here. Kind of want to make it more loose. And introducing some other colors is kind of nice, even though they aren't quite the accurate colors we see in the reference. It's you don't always have to be literal. And bit of a button there, and there's some shadow there. And again, up in here. So I'm going to get a little messy in here because I'm just interested in getting an impression, not a perfect rendering. I said earlier, use the biggest brush you can get away with, and I'm mucking around with a small brush, so I think I'm going to come back in, get a little bit bigger brush. That might help me do this with more confidence, and there we go, like that. Yeah, it's good to get that established there, and then again, I want to go up and blend this up into, but now I am going to change the color to more of a brown with the black in it. Cobalt mixed in to that because, yeah, cobalt and burnt umber can make a nice combination there. And again, it's black all the way through, all the way around him. So I'm just going to go all the way, killing I really don't want any light in that background. And wanting to, but I do need to keep that sharp edge along the ear, like you see. Again, this blends quite with the background, and then around that ear, and then down through here. Now I'm going to come along up in here and do just these wisps of hair. Remember I said earlier, by putting down that lighter brown, I was going to create a way to kind of show some highlights in his hair, right? That's what I'm doing here. Don't have to be super like I don't have to put the dark spots exactly where they are in the reference. It's not that big a deal. It's more important just to get a nice, organic sense of the way, kind of just hair moving. Yeah. Best again to kind of it's the word squint a bit. And this kind of really actually blends in over there with the background quite a bit. Comes down in front of the ear here. Actually goes all the way through into the beard. Kind of that. That. Got a pretty square jaw there. So kind of changing that outline from what I had drawn it as. It wasn't quite right. And it's darkest along the very bottom edge of his beard and chin, but gets lighter as it moves up into the skin. So I don't want to make it an entire mass. Even little broken areas, it gets pretty light right there. So I'll just kind of, and then, like that. Give that suggestion here. Okay, there's a pretty strong dark there, and then not so strong as it comes this way. So many areas to work on. Your eye just kind of moves around. Moving from one spot to the other. And that's one way to kind of avoid painting in an area that's currently wet, is to kind of move around the painting. And as you do, you just go to different parts that are currently dry and kind of work on those for a bit. Some dry brush. I can actually get away with some dry brush up in here because, well, one, I've got really thick paint on the brush, but also some areas are pretty wet, but okay. It's very dark in here. In fact, it goes right into the black of that background back there. Just kind of giving a little more texture to that background back in there, make it interesting. And now that I've done that there, I think I need to do it in some other areas as well. You know, I think I read this wrong. I think this is the edge of the ear is here, not where I had it. So I'm shortening this ear on this side a little bit. I read the line wrong that I had drawn. There, that's better. Okay, what do we think? What do we think? Not bad, I guess. Of course, the eyes haven't been not such an important part. They kind of a portrait looks pretty weird until you get the eye done. So again, as we go along, we move from big shapes down to smaller and smaller and smaller shapes. One thing I notice here is like there's, you know, kind of some dark in this part of the ear. And you can just work on little areas, like their own little painting here. Kind of this move up into here, because this is dry now. I like that, that's good enough. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at this area here. That needs to be quite a bit darker, that right side. If you squint at the reference and look back at the painting at this point, it's still way, the right side of the face still needs to be quite a bit darker. That is the shadow side. And right now, I'm going to mix up more of my kind of classic what's the word here? Skin tone to the right color, and it's just a little bit more grayed out. This neutral tint is a handy color if you want to kind of need to quickly. Don't want to use it too much, but. Okay, like that. Okay, pretty dark here. Okay, so let's come. And the shape is it kind of comes around here. The darkest shade is there, and under his eye, literally goes into his eyebrow. And here. Goes right up to the edge of the eye there. And in here, dark. Then this side. There's a shadow cast that way. Then it comes down. This is all dark. And I've already done that once before, but it just wasn't dark enough, right? So you have to go back in and add more to it. And this is all quite, except for maybe a little light on the fold of the eyelid there, but otherwise it's pretty dark. Okay. And by getting that face, it starts to, getting all of that in, it starts to add more of a sense of the shape of the face, right? You can see that. And just as I did that there, I kind of need to go and even darken this a little bit more. Okay, it was. And that more. And that more. The only area over here, which I was trying to do earlier, but backed off of it, kind of on the right side of the left eye. Oh yeah, and this comes down in here too. Oh. There we go. It all just starts to come together. You just have to work at it for a while. And don't give up. Just because it seems like it's not working at one point. You just got to keep. There's kind of a Adam's apple thing there. And yeah, it's not that dark. I mean, light there on that side of the neck. Okay, what's better? Still shouldn't be, she needs to be darker all along in there. Something like that. Oh yeah, and then this actually goes along under the nose here. Little one nostril on that side. And, you know, I kind of need to see if I can lift some color on this nostril right here. Okay, yeah, that's better. And then come back with the dark of this nostril right there. And it flows down into that part of the mustache. Okay, as I was sitting here looking at this, I was letting it dry a bit and just kind of stepping back and looking. I think this one shoulder on this side, on the left side, is way too low. It's like somehow I cut off. So let's see if I can just extend, make that more like that. See if I'm putting down some of this lavender, which has some white in it. And so it can, you know, I mean, you really can't lighten something over that dark, but because it has a little bit of white in it, sometimes you can get away with that there. And maybe, since I'm doing it in one area, I think I might do it in a couple areas on this sweater so it doesn't look like, so the mistake doesn't look too obvious. Something like that, that makes sense. And like in here too, where I had more blooms, you know, weird blooms going on there. I think I might do that there. And this kind of part of the sweater kind of goes that way. So we'll put some brush strokes that go that way. And yeah, like that. That looks cool. It's a great color for doing things like this lavender Daniel Smith color. All right, let's just let that be, let that dry. All right, now I'm gonna go and do the eyes. The eyes have a little glint of light color, kind of right there in the upper left corner of the pupil on both sides. And so I'm gonna put that in now. I think I'm gonna let that kind of dry because it's not really a white glint. It's got a little bit of blueness to it. And so I wanna get that in there, and then, you know, it's nice to have little hints of other colors here and there. Looks more natural. Okay. I'm also going to be focusing on doing the mouth, so I think I'll let that little glint area dry for just a second. Come down and look at the mouth. I'm actually mixing in some of this cooler red, which is my permanent alizarin crimson. And I'm just going to get the line. Now, I'm using my number 8 round. This is a Princeton Aqua Elite. A little stiffer than the other brushes I was using before, which were Neptunes. And of course, can be the most, this is where the painting can kind of come together now, right? When you put in these little details, especially the facial features. Like, I'm going to go get this more blue by putting some blue in it, making it purpley, darkening it. Yeah, because it's really not a red over here along this side or in the crease here. It's really more almost black. So instead of using black, we'll use kind of mix up a really dark purple using the same color I was using on the lips to create some consistency. And that there as well. There we go. I switch to my brown. That dark area right under the lip, lower lip, that part of the beard. Come down, just put a bit more detail there. Okay. Sorry, I'm not giving a lot of detailed kind of description here. Sometimes it's hard to paint and talk at the same time. I just put a little bit redder glint there. All right. And the rest of this lip, it's much more similar in color to the skin color. Kind of blends in here, just a little bit darker along there. There we go. That looks pretty good. The upper lip here. There we go. And I think I could add a little more dark. And maybe even this purpley dark would work over here too. Because that's pretty dark in there. All right, let's go back to the eye. Now that that's, the eyes are brown. I'm going to zoom in on that. Yeah, brown. To actually have some of this raw sienna color, really. Which is a lovely color, by the way, raw sienna. So I'm going to start with the lightest color that's in the eye. In the, well, not the lightest. I already did the lightest, which was that glint, kind of with a purpley color. But below that, there's a lighter raw sienna color, kind of around the iris. Always start with your lightest color in watercolor, and then drop in the darker color, which will then kind of blend out into that lighter color and give some. And of course, we're avoiding the glint area there. And the funny thing is the eye actually doesn't just do that, it actually connects. The dark area of the eye actually connects right into the eyelashes and all of that. And there's a bit of a dark crease in there, and there's some in the corner, and all of that. And of course the same is true on this side. Comes up. Kind of the dark area even goes into that corner of the eye there. This comes back this way. There we go. Again, don't just think eye and try to paint an eye. You gotta look carefully at what you're actually seeing there. And again, this is really dark in here, and actually never really finished the eyebrows there either. Okay, let me just soften some of this. Yeah, really see kind of a raw sienna with some of this burnt umber in it. And again, this whole area up in here. Oh, a little too dark, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. It's almost black. I don't like that. A lot of people think mistakes are unfixable in watercolor, but they're not. But you do have to get on it right away. Just you can lift things. Various ways to lift things. Okay, that's kind of fun. Let's just leave that for now. Let's not fiddle with it anymore. And this eyebrow is much lighter. So I'm going to just use some little brush strokes and kind of have some broken edges in it so it doesn't look quite as dark. And going down into here, yes. What is that? How does that look? I think that looks okay. But there definitely is kind of a purpley, that the white of the eye is actually not perfectly white, even though I left it that way. It is actually, this is where this, is that color called? Lavender again comes in nicely. Because along the edges, kind of in the corners, the color of the whites of the eyes is much more of a, sometimes pinkish, or blue, or in this case, kind of lavender. It's just not, and I'm going to soften that edge so it's not so obvious, but there we go, like that. That looks better. There's even a little bit of that in here. A little bit more of a shadow there. It's much darker inside that nostril there. Both sides. That's better. And I'll darken here. There. It's a bit lightness right here that I failed to retain. So again, I'm going to lift, take a brush, a stiff angled brush like this, and just lift out that highlight right there. I felt like it was kind of important. All right. Yes, you can lift in watercolor. You can go back and as long as you do it very gently, it can be done. It doesn't look too obvious. Yeah. Just some light hairs in his beard there. Okay. Oh, I think I'm spending more time on this than I really wanted to. Didn't I say at the beginning I was going to try and do kind of, I don't know, like 15 or 30 to 40 minutes. I don't even know how long it's been. But I get all caught up in it, and it's hard to stop. I want a bit more of this pinky color. I want to go into the corner here. Kind of darker on that side, even down here. Ooh, I think it looks pretty good. I think it looks pretty good. Now, I went a little too dark, a little too orangey, I think, in the skin tone. That happens a lot, it seems like. But you still, it is a really dark picture with, you know, and his face just kind of glows out of the dark background, and I think I achieved that. You know, it's, yeah, it's not perfect. Again, I think I went a little too orangey, maybe too, not a lot, yeah, too orangey in some of the skin tone, that's obvious, but oh well. It's a good exercise. I encourage you to, you know, find a picture online or of a person, well, probably not of a person you know. Don't paint a person you know. That's really hard to do. And then you're like, oh, I know it. You see all the ways in which it really doesn't look like that person because you know them so well. So I don't necessarily recommend you start with portraits of people you know. I don't know this guy. I just got his picture off the internet. So, you know, I'm sure if his mother looked at this, she'd go, ah, you know. Anyways, but his mother doesn't know, so it's okay. Yeah, and you can just keep going forever. But I think that this is a good exercise in painting a portrait in watercolor, trying to be gain the impression of the portrait in a fairly short amount of time, and creating a likeness of a person using, you know, retaining the highlights, the whites here, trying to see shapes and not things, soft and hard edges throughout, values, trying to get the values right, which I think I did okay on. It's a little too dark in here, like I said, a little too orange overall. But I think the way the hair worked pretty well and blends right into the background, and kind of fixed some problems with the shoulders not being right. But I figured out how to do that with the lavender. So overall, I think it worked out pretty good. So I'd love to hear your comments below. Let me know if you tried this, how it went. The link to the picture I used is in the comments below. You can download it for yourself and give this a try, and or use some other image that you're interested in painting. And I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.